Good, thank you. Just want to double check there, Kathy, you're able to see my slides still. Something just
Yes.
changed.
Yep, all good.
Okay, something changed on my end, but that's okay. We're good to go. Okay, so this session, module 2, we're going to delve further into the kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types. We started talking about that. Remember, we had the Usain Bolt analogy, and we looked at some side impact crashes and head-on crashes, and hopefully you've watched a little bit of Mythbusters, starting to think about the delta V, the change in velocity there and impacts. So we're going to delve into that a little bit further. We're going to look at some characteristics of intersections that align highly with safe system principles and mid-block locations. And by looking at those, we'll also, I suppose, look at what doesn't align highly with safe system principles. Now, before I sort of jump onto that, you'll notice there's something, and I'll probably say this a few times. You'll notice that I say align highly with safe system principles or doesn't align highly with safe system principles. I don't use the terminology of that is safe system or that is not safe system. Now that's very it's very specific and thoughtful terminology there. And the reason for that is that we know that the safe system is it's a spectrum of how well we're aligning with these principles that we talked through in last session. It's not sort of this binary, yes, that's safe system, and or no, it's not. And it's funny when you see out there the programs and the work, and people will say, oh, that's not safe system. And you're like, well, I mean, there's elements of it that are, and there's bits, and some of it is, and then some of it's not so good. And the reality is that it either aligns highly with safe system principles or it doesn't align highly, or the like. And that's why a safe system assessment, we go about scoring things out of 448. We'll get to that later. But we can say things are, pretty well aligned with safe system principles or not so much. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that, and that's why I use those terms. Okay, so let's start with intersections. And I'll jump into a few little bits of information for you and then get you to do a little bit of thinking around an existing intersection. Now, intersections are a point on the road network where there is increased risk. And I think that's pretty obvious to all of you. We have the conflict points, and then we have the ability for vehicles to crash. We also have pedestrians, crossing at this location. So there's more pedestrians crossing. Of course, we have pedestrians crossing mid-block as well, but there's more there. We actually also have quite an increase in the risk of runoff road crashes at intersections. And the reason for that is twofold. One is, well, actually threefold. One is the avoiding of a crash. So a vehicle pulls out when they shouldn't or runs a red light, and another vehicle avoids, right, and leaves the road. Okay, so we've got that conflict, that turbulence at that intersection, and vehicles are leaving the road. Okay, so that's one. The secondary crash is another. So that may be that they clip the back of a car or clip another car and spin and go off. So that's the second one. That sort of that secondary crash, we call it. So there's some first incident and collision, and then there's secondary crashes. And the third one is that we put a lot of point source hazards around intersections. Okay, so this one's a signalized one, and we're putting signal pedestals, and no doubt there'll be power poles, because that's a point where you're going to have to, jump an area or turn a corner with the power lines. We've got lighting usually, and at other intersections, we tend to put a lot of point source hazards at intersections. So when vehicles leave the road, they're more likely to hit something fairly early and immediately, and it'll be something fairly severe. So not only are we having this crash at intersections, we're also having that runoff road crash. And of course, crashes with pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. So Monash University Accident Research Centre, and I'll put the source down there, they came up with just a few sort of high-level principles in some of their reporting around safe system intersection design. And And, it was a while back, but I think the principles are still pretty well acknowledged and used. And they do start you at a very high level. And they talk about things like fewer vehicles, fewer intersections. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? So we're really stepping back up to a strategic planning level, aren't we? But when we look at that, fewer vehicles or fewer intersections, what we're doing is actually altering the exposure. Remember, we talked about exposure, likelihood, severity as our three elements that we'll be analysing in a safe system assessment. So fewer vehicles, that's fewer people exposed or fewer vehicles exposed, fewer intersections, there's less conflict points out there, less points to be able to be crashing. Then if you go to less conflict points per intersection, that becomes a likelihood factor, okay? There's just less points within that intersection envelope that conflict could occur. Now, if some of you may not be sort of familiar with the term conflict point, some of you are very, very familiar with it, which is good. I will show you a sort of conflict point diagram later on, but it's just basically points where vehicles can crash or vehicles and other road users can crash. But after you're sort of done into that, then you're starting thinking about, okay, what is the energy of these crashes and how do we alter that? And how do we keep things to that speeds and impact angles within biomechanically tolerable levels? And then we go back to those figures that we were talking about, 50 kilometers per hour for that 90-degree crash, somewhere between 50 and 70 where you can get more angle on the crash. And this comes back to sort of vectors, really. And so if we've got the ability to crash more like that, more energy is pushed out into the environment rather than to the occupant of the vehicle. So that's basically the difference between that, harder right angle crash or more of a bounce off, right? Energy out into the environment. And then, of course, 30 kilometers per hour or below is our sort of aspiration for where there's vulnerable road users involved. And then we're trying to sort of get as much elimination of risk as possible if we can't be achieving these. Now, I do stress again that this is the delta V, right? The delta V. So you can operate an intersection at quite high speed if, right, you've accelerated the vehicle. So I'm just talking vehicle to vehicle here. But if you're able to have some sort of acceleration lane and you get vehicles up to a certain speed, these vehicles coming through here, we can have a collision at quite high speed, as long as that difference in speed, the delta V, is within our tolerable levels for that crash type. So I'll expand on that a little bit more shortly, but we'll start to get you ready to do a little bit of an exercise soon. So I'll put lots of these tables up, lots of these things showing different angles, different speeds. You'll see there that a lot of this has been determined from ChemX or XChemX, which is the kinetic energy management model. I mentioned that in the last session. It's a sort of model that you can use to put in all your variables of speed and weights of vehicles and angles, and then it'll spit out some information about severity of impact or predicted severity. But you can see there, we've got some speeds, and so you can start to think about crashes that could happen at an intersection, a proposed intersection, or an existing intersection, and start to think about angles and think about speeds. And you're starting to get an idea then of whether it's in tolerable sort of levels or not. Now, you don't need to be this precise. This is a little bit more precise, but any of you are sort of CAD users can easily do this. But for a safe system assessment, we probably don't need, well, I mean, we definitely don't need to be that detailed. We can just sort of be going, okay, that vehicle is coming out there and they're going to be struck by a bullet vehicle coming through here. That's about a 90-degree crash, isn't it? All right. onto the other side of the road. Oh, they're probably getting a bit more angle on that. So that's probably just a bit more angle there. A bit of that energy will be dissipated out. So maybe I'm talking 50 kilometers per hour here and 60 kilometers per hour here as our sort of tolerable speeds on those different crash types. And we're going to be trying to get below that. And so I talked to you about the secondary crash. I mean, we don't usually, well, we sometimes do, get that absolute, direct right angle type crash right into the middle of the car. Yeah, we do have all these, weird ways that crashes are occurring and people trying to avoid and clipping and it's quite chaotic in there in the actual impact. But the secondary crashes are then happening in all sorts of ways. We certainly have a big exchange of energy here. But if it's a clip off or an avoiding or the like, we can see some different things. And the Center for Automotive Safety Research again did some analysis of secondary crashes that result in deaths and serious injuries. And it's kind of obvious, but no, they did it nonetheless. And then they plotted it onto these axes, and you can see sort of vehicle coming in, intersection, and this is where we're seeing the majority of the secondary crashes. I hope you're counting your Wallies as well. I'm sure you are. Your secondary crashes. I mean, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? The physics of that's fairly understandable. But you do get some other ones that occasionally, fling off in different areas. Okay, of course, keep your questions coming in as I go, but I'm going to get you to do something now, and it's going to give you a little bit of time to do some thinking. But let me create the scenario for you here. Okay. Here is an intersection, existing intersection, and we've got 2 lanes in each direction on the main highway, and the speed on the main highway, the speed limit is 70 kilometers per hour. We've got a side road there, and the speed limit on the side road is 50 kilometers per hour, default. We've got about 20,000 vehicles a day on the main road. And we've got about maybe 2,000, which is a bit under 2,000. We'll go with 2,000 on the side road. That's our traffic volume. It's about 11% heavy vehicles or commercial vehicles on the main road. So large, and it's a B double route. It's a proper arterial road. It's a highway. We've got a bus stop here. This is a big drain culvert thing. Drains out into this area. The shared path here, where we've got down the road about 300 meters, 400 meters is a school. We've got service roads in here, which are 2-way service roads. It's probably about enough information for you there. It's a residential area, as you can see there. Now, your task is going to be to eliminate death and serious injury at this intersection into the future. But here, let me give you a bit of a look at it from ground level. This is how it looks. You can see there's that bus stop I talked about. So we've got this 2-way service roads. See, there's some trees, there's some lighting, turn lane. Let's have a look from the other direction. See that shared paths over here, drainage structure there. So that's what we've got. And your task, is to alter this intersection to remove fatal and serious injury crashes at this location going forward. I am going to give you some constraints though. Okay, you've got a $3 million budget. You can't close the intersection Okay, I know you're thinking, okay, well, I'll just close this off. That'll eliminate all of the conflict points, and that's the second one. You can't do that. It actually, you have to operate. People have to be able to turn out in or get out into all directions and come in from all directions. And the other one is that you have to operate in your current political organizational environment. So if you're proposing something, fairly radical, fairly out there, I'm going to ask potentially a bit of a plan on how you might actually get that through the system and get it approved and get it built or changed or whatever you're proposing to do. So it doesn't stop there. You've got another few little things. Anytime you come up with any idea, we're going to ask you to put either a little E next to it for exposure, or an L next to it for likelihood, or an S next to it for severity. So this is any treatment you're proposing, any changes you're proposing, are they going to impact on the exposure to crashes? So the numbers of vehicles or pedestrians or cyclists or motorcyclists, are they going to change the likelihood of crashes, make it less likely people will crash? Or is it going to alter the severity of the crashes that occur? Okay, and so it could be more. You could be likelihood and severity for some treatments or the like. But I want you to just have a go at that. So you might say, I don't know, I think of something that's, okay. You might say, remove this tree, okay, for example. Not that I'm a advocate for removing trees, but I'm just trying to think of an example you might say to remove the trees, and you go, remove the tree. That means that people are going to be less likely to hit the tree when they leave the road. They still could be involved in a runoff road crash, couldn't they? So they might miss that, but they might go through and they hit another tree or hit a house or hit one of these power poles or the like. So actually we call that a likelihood reducing factor. A lot of people would want to call it a severity reducing factor, but actually in the safe system assessment, we peg it down to likelihood. It's probably actually quite a hard example that I randomly picked there in terms of how we categorize things in a safe system assessment. Okay, let's go. I'll give you another example. Maybe you want to move the bus stop from this location down to here, okay? Because you think, that's not, it's a bit messy there. It's a bit turbulent, there's a lot going on. Don't quite like that location of it, so I'm going to move it down there. That would certainly be a likelihood reducer because you've put it to an area where there's less chance a crash will happen. Okay? There's still the same exposure because we're still going to have the same number of buses, we're going to have the same number of vehicles, we're going to have the same number of passengers. Okay, so there's still the same numbers of people there. We're going to have the same severity of crashes because the crashes are essentially going to be the same, pretty much. There's just less chance of them actually happening. But the speeds will be the same, the vehicles will be the same, the angles will likely be about the same. And so we're still in the same severity, but the chance will be less. So there you go. That one, move the bus stop and then you put a little L next to it. Now, some of you are probably going, well, okay, that's all good, Ken, thank you, but I don't actually know how much infrastructure costs, or I don't know how much things cost. And you've given me a $3 million budget. That makes no sense to me. I will be your instant cost estimator tool. So you can simply write in cost, please, for, I don't know, grade separation, like a flyover, interchange. And I would say, that's $42 million. It's well out of your budget. You cannot, you won't be able to afford to grade separate this intersection. But you can ask anything and I'll give you an estimated budget. Or if you think, it'll be about that, you run with your ideas. The point of the exercise isn't to do refined budgeting and estimating. The point of the exercise is to think about different treatments, whether they influence exposure, likelihood, and severity, and how we can get the best outcome in terms of the best alignment with safe system principles and the most reduction in death and serious injury, as close to zero death and serious injury into the future as possible. Okay, I'll pause there, Kathy, and I'll see, does anybody have any clarification questions on the task? We're going to give you, a good 4 or 5 minutes to have a think about it, ponder things, jot a few ideas down. You can, send them through as you think of them, or you can write us a little bit of a few dot points of different treatments. You don't need to put the costs in when you type it in. But Kathy, any questions coming up?
No questions as yet. Maybe we might get some questions on some cost estimating.
All right, well, get started, but put your questions in as you come, or reach out for a cost estimate. But give us your ideas or your questions. We'll give
I'll throw one in, Ken. What about if you put a roundabout in there? How much would a roundabout cost?
Okay, a full-size roundabout, meeting the Austra's Guide to Road Design Part 4B. Is that roundabout? I think. Yeah. Would cost you $5.8 million. So you can't afford to do that.
Thanks. That's a bit expensive, and I must have read Reese's mind because he was asking the cost for a roundabout as well. So just in the chat, if you want to type in your cost estimate questions or your suggestions for what you might do to remove fatal and serious injuries here. Cost for a signalisation, please, Ken.
Yes, okay. To signalise the intersection is $1.9 million. It's actually set up quite well for signalisation with the islands and everything like that. So 1.8 million is a pretty good deal. I dare say somebody who originally designed this road or duplication may have thought that at some point. Now remember to put in exposure, likelihood, severity. You can do multiple treatments. I'm seeing some coming in already. Thank you. Keep them coming. Yes, and just answer into the chat, and then we'll have a chat about some of the things that have come through. So we'll give you another 3.5 minutes or so.
Ken, if you're still there, could you give us a cost, please?
Yes.
Relocation of the shared path to align with the trunk SW grade separation.
So I think that's saying to go under. So yeah, it's a good idea. We'll talk about it more. It's a good couple of $1 million because this, you can't see it from here, but this is actually isn't deep enough to have people go through it. But I do like the idea. In fact, whoever asked the question about it can have a prize, Kathy.
Okay, great. Yes, that was in line with the thinking, the stormwater culvert.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear that.
Oh, sorry, that was in line with the thinking there. He's come back to say it was the stormwater culvert. So yeah.
You trailed off at the end, but I think I got what you said.
Good. I'll give a prize.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I am seeing some fantastic stuff coming in here, and I'm particularly happy with the way people are categorizing likelihood and severity. Exposure hasn't yet, not too many people putting stuff on exposure, but that's kind of right. But I'm going to do some clarification. I'll give it 5 seconds for anybody who wants to pop their last thing in. But yeah, very impressive here. All right, let me have a look through and make some comments on some of the things we're seeing here. And I think we've got some good ideas. We've obviously got a group who are immersed in infrastructure changes and understand a fair bit about what will work and what won't work and reasons for that. So we talked a little bit about a roundabout. People were interested in that at the start and then realized how expensive it would be, land acquisition, the size of it, moving services, and then sort of moved off that. Signalization then came into play, and people started saying, well, is signalizing going to influence exposure, likelihood, or severity? And we had a few varied comments on that, but most people landed on the fact that it's going to be the likelihood because, it's going to lessen the chance of a crash, but crashes still will occur, and speeds will be varied as they are with all crashes, but there's nothing really to stop people or change the angle or make them go slower. Yes, there's a red light, which hopefully will tell them to go slower, but we'll explore that a little bit. But a few people onto that. Now, then there was some people who are quite interested in putting barriers around the culverts, the trees, and road safety barriers. And we saw a few different exposure likelihood or severity comments around that. The installation of a barrier system is a severity reducing technique. So we still categorize hitting that barrier as a crash. It's just a very less severe crash than hitting that point source hazard of a tree or a power pole or dropping into a culvert or the like. So it's a severity reducing technique. So then we had some people starting to go into a little more, I suppose, elaborate things. And we see Irene there's starting to put forward this idea of a raised platform of some description, which is interesting. So the idea of slowing some of the vehicles utilizing vertical deflection. We might come back to and explore that a little bit. We got some different tweaks on the signalization there. More people thinking about signalizing crossing points. Ben's come through with quite a nice and detailed little scope of works there with a whole lot of different things in there, including things that address the likelihood, the severity with some speed reductions and raised intersections, and moving around the bus stop for the likelihood, Yeah, I think that's a pretty comprehensive and good one. Let's give Ben a prize for that one. I'm just sort of flicking through now, check if anything sort of different has come through here. Okay, so we've got some ideas around sort of different ways to lessen the risk for pedestrians with pedestrian crossings or the like. Pretty much everything there in terms of creating either pedestrian operated signals or pedestrian crossing, across the roads of ways of doing that is going to reduce the likelihood of crashes. Their likelihood reduces. To get an exposure reduction, we're going to have to somehow alter the amount of pedestrians exposed to those crashes. Now, somebody came up with that idea of, going under, utilizing the culvert there as a way to do that. I mean, that would reduce the exposure for pedestrians because there are literally less numbers of pedestrians making that crossing movement exposed to the vehicle crashes. So that would do that. As I said, there's a few little problems with that, but I do always love that thinking. And that's why we gave a prize there because, if we have these, drainage structures or bridges or the like, and we can utilize that grade separation, it's wonderful. And I mean, we've really done that. And there are some pretty good examples. I mean, Queensland does it really, really well. In fact, there's a TMR note on exactly how to utilize the drainage structures or other structures for pedestrian cycle underpasses or grade separations. People get worried about, what about if it's, if it's underwater and people will drown and I mean, first of all, people aren't going to go into it if it's underwater, and you can manage that a little bit with, under appropriate ways. And it's a very, small period of time that it is that, but we do need to, just factor that in. Bendigo does this really well as well. I've enjoyed doing, cycling audits through the different underpass structures for the share path facilities. And, there's really good examples around the place. So always good to try to utilize existing infrastructure, saves you a bit of money. Unfortunately, this one is actually quite shallow. It's a bit hard to see from the aerial image, but I love the thinking. Yeah, okay. There's some ideas to underground the power poles and the like, which would certainly reduce the chance of somebody having a runoff road crash. Now, we do attribute that as a likelihood factor. Now, I know people would be very tempted to say that it's an exposure factor because you leave the road, you're not exposed to hitting a pole, right? But the way we think about things in the safe system assessment is to bring it back to the crash. Is there the exposure to a runoff road crash still in existence? And the answer is yes, because the vehicle could leave the road, it could still hit still go to the culvert, hit the tree, go to the houses. So it's less likely because they've got a chance that they leave the road, they recover, they come back. Now, we don't classify that as a crash. So we've reduced the likelihood of the crash, but not the exposure. You may have an argument to say the severity will be less because you've removed the point source hazards, and it's more likely they'll hit a brick wall or something where the energy will be distributed along the vehicle across, an area rather than that point. But generally, that's a bit more detailed than you need to get into, and it's really just generally attributed as a likelihood reducing factor. Be very expensive, but certainly a possibility. Yeah, okay. Well, as I say, well done. I'm going to come back to this intersection, but I'm going to use this as a little bit of discussion on a few different points here to analyze this in more detail. But really good work from people there. We'll be back to this intersection. But let's talk then about that signalization, okay? Putting traffic signals up, with fully controlled right turns even, and I noted that I think it was Ben's there was, very specific on fully controlled right turn, and that's a really good, treatment to reduce the chance people crash. Fully controlled right turn being the red arrow. And, it's great. The signalization does a good job in reducing the chance of crashes. But unfortunately, we see still a lot of crashes happening at signalized intersections. And in fact, I just grabbed a heat map of death and serious injury. I just used outer metropolitan Melbourne, but I could have done this for outer metropolitan Brisbane or Sydney or Adelaide or Hobart. Yeah, it's pretty much anywhere. Like when you're in those areas where you have higher speed arterial roads and they intersect with other high-ish speed arterial roads, I'm talking 60, 70, 80 kilometre per hour roads, and we have a signalized intersection, the result is just death and serious injury. Right? Now, admittedly, it's less death and serious injury than if that was controlled by just a give way sign and we still had the same volumes crossing. But nonetheless, we keep building signalized intersections and somehow expecting we're going to get a different result. It's quite, it's quite interesting, and it does remind me actually of something that, just going to see if I can pull something up, Kathy. I'm going to go slightly off script. No, I can't quite find it there. Sorry, bear with me a second. Yeah, Kathy, are you still there?
Yeah, what are you doing?
It just made me think of something that I want to try to find. Here it is. I found it. Okay, so I want to tell a story.
Got my attention.
Sorry?
You've got my attention.
Yeah, good. Okay, so you can, I was just fumbling around to try and find something out of my archive. So I was working in the road safety department at Vic Roads back quite a while back, and there was this big program of work. So it was called Keep Melbourne Moving, and it was a congestion easing program. Big, it was Australia's biggest ever congestion easing program, and the way they go. And so they're analysing what's slowing down cars moving around Melbourne, and and a lot of these growth areas were having particular problems, and so they looked, and the traffic modelers got involved and did lots of analysis, and they came up with all of these projects to improve vehicle flow. The majority of them were to take roundabouts out and replace them with traffic signals. And I thought, okay, yep, that's certainly going to improve traffic flow for vehicles. We can all pretty much agree on that. So anyway, those projects were then developed in the regions, and then they were sent in a head office for a safety review. And anyway, so it came across my desk and a colleague's desk, and we would review them. And we made lots of comments on the the line marking, sight lines to signals, phasing, and bits and pieces like that. But we also sort of went, well, there's an underlying issue here. And we started then producing this, and I kept a copy of it. Oh, not that. Here we go. Hopefully you're seeing that now, Kathy.
Yep.
This is just the template we were using. So we create this memo from whoever it was, the road safety department. It could be me, it could be my colleague. And here we go. So the road safety statement was, the road safety department's analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, so projects have a life for your calculations and the like, 20 years. Number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. Put some little people there to remind them they're people that are going to be killed. Number of serious injuries attributed to this project, 12.6. And then a statement of acceptance. The above road trauma is accepted by, and then regional manager. I think they're called regional directors these days. They used to be regional managers. And so we plonk that on the top of the project with all of our other notes and send it back. So obviously caused a lot of controversy and ruffled lots of feathers, and lots of people, especially executive directors and the like, saying we're not understanding the responsibility of a road authority, which is to balance and manage. Good question there, Irene. Did anybody sign it? No, they certainly did not. And we're very angry at it. We were told to stop doing that. But sometimes, you need to boil this down to a conscious decision, because it's known. Now, I'm going to go back to my slides, and I'm going to sort of explain a little bit more about how we know that. How are we able to sort of know that? I'll just remove that. And we know that because we know the death and serious injury we see at intersections. We know the speeds people are going through there, and we know sort of a crash reduction factor generally for traffic signals, generally around 40 to 45% reduction in death and serious injury from a passively controlled intersection, being a give way or a stop intersection or the like. Of course, case by case, it can be very different, but that's a nice sort of general one. A roundabout, on the other hand, we know gives around the 80 single lane roundabout, 80 to 85% reduction in death or serious injury for passenger vehicles. Have some challenges with cyclists and pedestrians a little bit, but a lot of these areas were, heavily car dominated in everything. But interestingly, we attribute the reduction here to a severity reduction. And the reason for that is that vehicles slow down and they crash at better angles. Okay, so we actually, a roundabout, we will see about the same number of crashes as a signalized intersection. But the severity of those crashes is so much lower. And so that difference, that 45 to 85, is the difference in the death and serious injury we're going to see in the community at a general level for passenger vehicles between those two. You can analyze in a bit more precision, but that's enough of a generalization at the moment. So roundabouts, let's touch on them for a little bit. And they come in all shapes and sizes. And I was talking, when asked to cost that one at that other intersection, about a big roundabout. What about these little roundabouts? Obviously, this is a very, very different road environment. But the roundabout here is not working in the sort of traditional way that you'd think of a roundabout working, which is deflection and the like. But the big advantage here, and this is something that I want you to think about from the principal perspective, is that everybody approaching here, well, nobody approaching here believes they have ultimate priority. And ultimate priority leads to speed and lack of attention, I suppose. And what I mean by ultimate priority is, if you're driving along and you are on the priority road and the side roads that give way, you're not actively really focusing on that. Some people are a little bit better and others really zoned out and just driving along. But the speeds are there, and the inattention, and that's where we see the severity of crashes. As soon as you break this up like this, we've got everybody starts to switch on because they may have to stop or slow down or the like. So this could be a really amazingly effective treatment in that sense of just breaking up perception of priority. Well, you actually have priority in a lot of these situations, but there can be issues that arise. We certainly don't get big speed reduction. We'll get straight through there quite, potentially quite fast, but nonetheless, we see some pretty amazing improvements. People have the ability to, slow vehicles if they're worried about those straight runs through raised platforms and the like. And we're still really just attributing this all to severity due to some rear end crashes and some other incidents that we might see at low speeds at roundabouts. So roundabouts do reduce conflict points. as well. They simplify the task. They bring it back into crashes of nice angles as well. Anyway, there's a nice little conflict point diagram, very simplified conflict point diagram. There you go, ways you can crash at a roundabout, follow the dots, and ways you can crash at a signalized intersection or a passively controlled intersection. The angles you crash at, just better. Energy, more energy out into the environment on that one than there is on the other one. And this is the one that sort of goes back to that ultimate priority thinking, is that as a driver approaches a big bit of infrastructure or infrastructure in the middle of the road, or the configuration, the geometry of a roundabout of some description, no matter how zoned out they are or the like, most people come back to reality. They look around and they slow down. It activates their driving task. Unfortunately, traffic signals are not as good at doing that. You know, that they do that. The red lights, there, and people, but there is, there's quite a lot of people that run a red light unintentionally. There's lots that run the red lights intentionally, or push the end of the orange to get through. But there's quite a lot that will just go directly through a red light, and not till they're well past it to go, did I just run through red light? Or they just have no recollection or never noticed that at all. However, it's very rare that somebody will run straight through a roundabout. Occasionally you do it. There's an amazing video out there on online of somebody hitting a roundabout and going straight over. But it's very, very, very rare compared to what we see in terms of people running red lights unintentionally. So we just got all sorts of wins with that roundabout. Now, roundabouts are not all the same. I mean, they all generally operate better from a safety perspective for passenger vehicles than a plain signalized intersection. Even sort of those messy 3-lane ones that you might have been on and thought, oh my God, this is chaos. Well, the chaos happens at reasonable speeds. And so, yes, the crashes are up there, but we do know that, your 2-lane, your 3-lane roundabouts start to get less and less valuable from a road safety perspective and get closer to the safety operation of a set of traffic signals. But I just thought I'd throw this in for a bit of interest. So we've got the radius of the roundabout and the speed. Speed's pretty good proxy. Speed through is pretty good proxy usually for crashes. And you can see there that single lane, double lane, there's your difference. And then turbo roundabouts are 2-lane roundabouts with some special configurations to them. Here's a turbo roundabout. Pretty much operates from a safety perspective the same as a single lane roundabout, which is pretty amazing. But the difference is here that it's got a raised separator within the circulating carriageway. On the approach, got a raised separator. And so if you want to do a right turn, for example, you get yourself in that right lane, you go in and you come around and out you go. You want to go left, you get in that left lane and you're out there. So it kind of stops people running that straight line through there fast and the like. It stops a lot of that lane change issue, crashes within the roundabout. So it's pretty neat little setup. This is in the Netherlands that I've got there. You can see some pretty awesome bike facilities. We'll talk about bikes and roundabouts in our next module, and pedestrians as well. Here's another picture of a turbo, and I just love this for a couple of reasons. I mean, I love this. I've got a truck. And the truck's obviously entered the roundabout in front of a vehicle. First thing I'll look at it there is the angle. I'm like, oh, how good is that? You know that if that white car hits that, it's going to sort of bounce and deflect off, and the energy is going to be pretty good. Second one is without knowing much, we know the speed of that white vehicle is going to be quite slow, isn't it? I mean, it's a fairly radial roundabout, very sort of European design here, as as opposed to, our tangential ones that we would have in Australia, but nonetheless, but we just know the speeds will be low. And so we've just got there two things immediately, haven't we? We've got angle, we've got speed. I mean, there's two things that mean when that crash happens, severity is going to be low. So lots of good wins there. This turbo roundabout, so it's another one in the Netherlands, and this to me, it amazed me. And we brought a Dutch engineer over to talk about actually bikes at roundabouts, and we're doing some workshops and things like that. And I showed the Dutch engineer this one, and he knew the section. I said, I just find this amazing. Like, first of all, it blows my mind, the size of the land and the cost of this must the amount this would cost. But I said, like, in Australia, we would really for the volumes, we probably have a large signalized intersection, might have gone to grade separation, but probably a large signalized intersection based on what we've seen. And the Dutch engineer's like, oh yeah, with speed reductions, like platforms or the like. I'm like, no, it'd just be operating 70 or 80 kilometers an hour potentially in this sort of rural environment. And he could not fathom. His response was, well, but what about all the death and serious injury to your community? I'm like, yeah, I know. That's it. Just could not fathom that you would possibly operate a standard signalized intersection at those speeds. They would rather do this than go down the track of what we do just everywhere. And it's because they just go energy and human failure. And it's just going to result in death and serious injury. This one, yes, there's going to be human failure. There's going to be crashes, but they'll be slow. And the angles will be good in the majority of the cases. Now, this is signalized as well, just to add stuff. But that's the point. It's like they signalize it, but then they ensure that a vehicle, is slowed down because there's big infrastructure in the way. The angles are going to be better if crashes do occur. Lots of good stuff about it. Just a real different mindset there, isn't it? But what I'm liking seeing now is that Australians are starting to push back against conventional large signalized intersection design. It's still being built, but there's a lot of sort of pushback and people saying, no, what can we do? How can we get speeds and angles, the energy within tolerable levels? And this one's an interesting one. This is a mock-up. This is a design. This has not been built. I mean, it's an artistic impression or the like. But the concept was really, quite intriguing because they're trying to continue with the capacity through that intersection. Get as much vehicles through as they can. Very, high profile traffic route here. But how do you slow the vehicles down and get the angles better? And so trying to use this is called a cut-through roundabout. Got a safe system snippet on these, different roundabout designs. If you want to use your PDF and click on that, you can have a look at some other ones and the like. But I just like the idea that people are now challenging this concept, that we could run vehicles through here at 70 kilometers per hour straight and have other vehicles coming straight. And we just know that there's death and serious injury going to happen. And the idea of raised platforms. And I love the fact that running this course now, and I've been running this course for 12 or 15 years, and certainly like within 5 years ago even, nobody would suggest any sort of raised safety platform. I mean, that was an arterial road that we were looking at, B-doubles, buses, and the like. You would never in the past do vertical deflection, raise anything. I mean, if I had, in my early career suggested something like that, I would have been told to sit in the corner and think about what I possibly was talking about. But this has changed. And we see now that, we're not talking about urban style speed humps. We're talking about gentler grades, just getting speeds down a bit. And that's what the region sort of proposed at that intersection that you looked at. They said, well, signals are probably right because they're within our budget. We have unbalanced flow, meaning that, side road traffic was very low, main road traffic was quite high. So you can't really, it's very hard to run around about in an unbalanced scenario, but it can be done, meter it and do other things. But so I thought, it's probably best to signalize. Everything sounds like signalization, but we know that, we've got lots of signals in our region and we keep going to them because there are hotspots of death and serious injury. And in fact, a little exercise you could do is to look at your top 100 intersections for death and serious injury in your state, and you'll find about 90% of them are signalized intersections. And the volumes of vehicles through them and the like are very high. But nonetheless, I mean, to think that a signalized intersection is your sort of answer to safety, and then just no. So this region said, well, no, what more can we do? What can we do to address the severity? Okay, the signals are going to help with the likelihood. What can we do to address the severity? And they decided to try these raised safety platforms on the approach. Now, why are they doing it on just here, not the whole intersection? Well, they just want to address bullet vehicle speed. Bullet vehicle speed. These are target vehicles coming in and going out, right? They are not getting to the speed of doing the damage. And so what speed, here I'll ask the group, and first one to pop it in, what speed for passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle crashes do you think that they want to get the vehicles down to, the bullet vehicles? What speed are you thinking bullet vehicles would be good to get them down to? Okay, good. Seeing people within the right range there. I'm going to give that to Reese with the 50. 60 could be good because of the slight angles off. Generally, I'm going to say that the one coming out here and that crash is pretty close to right angle, but I can see why some people were saying maybe 60 and 40. We want to go down lower if we are talking about the pedestrians and cyclists as our threshold, but the 50, remember, if we go back to all of that, right angle, 50 kilometre per hour, passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle crashes. And you could, of course, look back to some of those charts that I gave you. But that's the thinking. It's like, how do you get the speeds down to that? Remember, it was a speed limit of 70 kilometres per hour. Okay, do we need to reduce the speed limit? Well, if we can slow the vehicles at the conflict point or just before the conflict point down to what we want, we don't need to speed limit them. I mean, the infrastructure will do that for them. We can give some advisory speeds. And of course, that's what they built. There you can see advisory speeds of 50. There's lots of advanced warning of this. It's a shallow ramp. It's not like the speed hump in your local street. It's a shallow, try and slow the vehicles down. And now we're at the point of addressing likelihood through the signals and severity through the speed reduction. And we're in a pretty exciting position there for a big step change in serious injury and fatalities at this site into the future. Probably a little bit more to think about with pedestrians and cyclists. I mean, this is going to give significant help, and there's a recent evaluation of raised safety platforms on major arterials that shows actually some really good results for pedestrian safety and pretty good results for vehicles, and much better results for vehicles than just the signals themselves. But you can see here how it sort of was built. And I was out there with a colleague doing post-opening road safety audits on this and just having a bit of a look and took some photos. And I love this photo for a couple of reasons. Well, one big reason. Look at this. We got green lights and we got the vehicle braking. I mean, this to me is just brilliant because we've disrupted the ultimate priority feeling we're slowing the vehicle down. And so if that vehicle was to come out, things are slower, they're within tolerable levels and the like. Some people get really angry at this, especially the traffic ops people. They're like, this is so inefficient. Why are we having to slow people down? And I'm like, oh, well, if we put a roundabout in there, everybody would be slowing down anyway. Like, I mean, it's just that we're not used to this. And we're not, people aren't quite yet on board with this idea. But essentially, we should be slowing down at this point on this road network where there is significantly increased risk. Now I'm seeing some questions come in here about rear end crashes. Yeah, so everybody's jumping on board. So when you do the first one of these, when you change something, everybody gets starts going into what are the increased risk chances. And the concerns were, okay, rear ends, certainly, as quite a number of you thought. Rear ends, heavy vehicle issues, buses throwing all the passengers off, Dukes of Hazzard style people going into fast, hitting this ramp, flying into the air, running off the road. The evaluations of this one down at Surf Coast Kidman in Belmont, but also the recent evaluation of all these ones in the outer Metro Northwest area in outer metropolitan Melbourne of Dalton Road and others have shown that there's been no increase in rear end crashes that are recorded. So there might be some minor ones. That was not, we weren't getting records of that. No increase in off-road crashes. Noise has not been an issue. That was another one that was, oh my God, I mean, this is going to be as noisy as anything. Hasn't been identified as a significant issue. A lot of the things that were genuine stoppers of these going in are just not playing out. There was the fear of the unknown, really. So I'm a huge supporter of it. I had been before this evaluation report, which we can try and provide to people who are interested. But now they're really showing some wonderful benefits. Another benefit, which was a bit more unexpected, was I suppose a tightening of the dilemma zone. So the dilemma zone, for those who aren't familiar with that term, is a traffic engineering term, which is when a vehicle is approaching a signal, a set of traffic signals, and it turns orange, there is a time, there's a period of time and space where they are in a dilemma. Do they put the foot down and go through, or do they hit the brakes? And with the addition of the raised safety platform, the dilemma zone extremely tightens because the majority brake in what used to be the dilemma zone. And because they know they're going to have to navigate this slight up and down. So it's pretty, it's a pretty good one. And, the thoughts of this only being used on lowish volume intersections has sort of been moved. You can see it here, and I love this example. So this is a whole raised intersection. I mean, there's a bit more work to do on the exact grades and constructability and a few sort of things. But this is Dalton Childs Road, for those who know it, and it used to be a roundabout, and the roundabout was capacity and causing traffic issues. And it was decided to rip out the roundabout, put in traffic signals, get things moving a bit more. But what I absolutely love is the fact that there was a safe system assessment done on this. The safe system assessment, in a more palatable way, did what that memo I showed you does. And it said, you're going to make things worse from a road safety perspective, right? You're going to increase risk. In fact, you are going to go away from safe system alignment, and you have a national strategy, you have a state strategy and you have regional strategies that all commit you to progressing the idea of the safe system, and this goes the other way. So then there was, okay, well, how do we get this to perform at least the same safety, if not better? And the addition of the race safety platforms came in. So there's a sort of live example of how a safe system assessment can play out. Kathy, I think a couple of things coming in the chat there.
Yeah, questions. So there's been a couple of questions about, and I think what you've referred to it as the Dukes of Hazzard style thing, but basically the issue being people who are inattentive are not going to slow down. So would they still run the red and launch over the platform and lose control?
Yeah, well, there's no indication that is happening there. I suppose maybe it's a little bit like the roundabout in the sense of people approach it and they see it and they see the physical change and the warning signs are good and all, and they slow down. So there's been no indication of that. The evaluations aren't showing that as an issue. We're not getting any reports of that sort of stuff. And there's been a fair deployment of raised safety platforms, either raising the whole intersection or raised platforms on the approach. So yeah, I mean, you can conjure that up in your mind. One of the things that I'll talk about this in the final module, is the road safety auditing. Okay, road safety auditing, I'm a big advocate of road safety audits. But a road safety audit's job, or an auditor's job, is to identify risks associated with putting this new infrastructure in place. Okay? So the auditors of these jobs are always straight away drawn, and all they report on is these potential issues. So what you see often when these come in is the road safety auditors are genuinely hampering innovation, because they look at, oh, there's a risk of that, launching, heavy vehicle rollover, this and that. And what you get back is this big report of risks associated with the implementations. Nowhere in the audit report does it talk about the massive improvements in safety that are going to be generated. That's not the auditor's role, okay? And that, so I'm not saying the auditors are doing a bad job. They're doing what they have to do for you to think about all these extra bits and try to work those through. But a safe system assessment, on the other hand, quantifies how much benefit you're going to do. You're going to get out of this thing, and then also might talk about some of those other issues and how they could be rectified. So to me, that's this huge added benefit of utilizing a safe system assessment at an early stage to try to quantify and show the benefit. You can do it through other means, but that's a pretty nice one. And then you get the audits coming down the track to try and ensure that we're doing everything we can to minimize any of those other risks.
Thank you, Ken. Another question is, should there also be a facility to reduce speed before the intersection?
Yeah, okay. That's a good one. So interestingly, this facility at the intersection actually reduces the speed well before the intersection. So next time you drive a speed hump in an urban area, watch where you slow down. You slow down on the approach to navigate, and that works the same. So it's not that vehicles are hitting this and slowing down. They slow down nicely on the approach, navigate through, and then they go. So these are facilities slow down. They also have, advanced, speed reduction, advisory speed, warning signs and the like. Yeah, if you were to put this too far in advance, though, you start to wash off some of your speed reduction.
And the previous, not this one, but the other intersection you showed with the race safety platform, is that one is that Dalton Road, Thomastown?
Yeah, Dalton intersection of Dalton and Childs Road. So if you, this is Thomastown, I think it is, just off the M80 out of metropolitan Melbourne. And there's now 1, 2, 3 in a row, 3 major intersections all raised in a row along that straight. And that's carrying 50,000 vehicles a day. It's a major bus route, emergency vehicle route, heavy vehicle route. It's a proper arterial road. It's really pumping traffic and vehicles through there yet. And that's, you know, it blows the mind of some of the jurisdictions that are not in this space yet. But we're seeing these now across, certainly Victoria's got lots of them. New Zealand's really getting on board, and we've got a lot of interest out of, you know, there's a lot of interest out of Queensland to start putting them in. New South Wales is a bit reluctant at the moment, but any of our New South Wales people, let's start getting out there and trialing them. I mean, there's lots of design notes out there. Now there's the Vic Roads or the Victorian Government Road Design Note on raised safety platforms. There's an Austroads document, which is really good, effectiveness and implementation of raised safety platforms. That's a pretty exciting one in New Zealand, just outside Hamilton, New Zealand. Very similar principles and really forming quite well as well. But I suppose I'm not, you know, the course here isn't about, you know, raised intersections. It's about the principle of not having areas that have conflict points, speeds that are well above the tolerable levels for the crashes that we know will happen because people will make mistakes and run that red light. Okay, so it's challenging that. I'm using this as, you know, an example of where that's been disrupted, that whole setup.
Quick question, Ken, sorry, on negative comments about noise from residents.
Yeah, again, that one, it sort of surprised me that it hasn't come out more, but at the moment, nothing major. Like, take Dalton Road of 54,000 vehicles a day. I mean, the amount of noise that was there beforehand with all of the traffic and the roundabouts and the braking and everything, and the trucks and everything beforehand, and the raising of the intersection sort of is a non-event. It's interesting because we associate speed humps with this sort of noise issue, and it's usually in a local area traffic management environment. Is, but you know, a residential street that's really quite quiet the majority of the time, a lot of the time, and then we put something in there that creates a little bit of noise, and then you get the tradies going through at 5 in the morning or whatever, and the tools bouncing around. You know, the residents have this new thing going from fairly quiet to a bit of noise, and you know, the putting it onto a major arterial, it's so noisy already that it really hasn't. Well, it hasn't raised its head as a major issue yet.
I'll just jump in there from a personal perspective, because there's a raised safety platform on the end of my street, which I lobbied council for a little while, and I think we might have one of the people in this group. Anyway, and there's less noise, Ken, because there's less crashes.
Well, there you go. That's a pretty good one as well. And Benjamin's put in a bit about profile as well, and you're right. The profile of the ramp and the like, can be less noisy. I mean, I really always encourage people to try and get out and drive one of these if you possibly can. If you come to Melbourne, I'll take you on a raised safety platform tour if you like. And it really is so different to what you are used to in terms of those local area speed humps. And anyway, I would keep going, but have a read of that Austroads report as well. And there you go, Kathy, you're a fan of them for their major purpose of reducing the crashes and the death and the serious injury. I just want to touch on that roundabout one as well. This is an interesting case study. Again, sort of a region challenging the just run of the mill, where you've got, this is the arterial road through there, but it's two high-speed roads. They are 100 kilometers an hour. Well, they got reduced to 80 due to the amount of crashes that were happening, but still lots and lots of death or fair bit of death and serious injury happening. This is like a communication exchange building, like a telecom exchange building. So the cost to move that was just insane. And the region was saying, well, we want a roundabout in here. We know that's going to reduce speed, angle of impact, wake people up. It's a really nice treatment. But, the size of that, the reverse curves on the approach, and then the size of it, the area going to need to take, it's just going to be so huge. And, move this, and, the cost was going up above $8 million or something. It was just, impossible for that to happen. But so they then looked at the usual, well, we'll put right turn lane in, and we'll, maybe put some active warning signs and the like. All these likelihood reducing ideas, and then they say, well, okay, we're going to reduce it by 20% or whatever it is. But how do we get it, close to elimination of death and serious injury at this location in the future? It's really re-examining how we think about reducing speeds and improving angles on the approach to intersections. This one, they went with the compact roundabout. And again, I'm not going to spend time on the details of compact roundabout design, because there's a couple of good design guides now for compact roundabouts, and the way you can possibly do things. Again, we've got a snippet for you, and we can send you the different documents or the designs of these. But the idea is that you have a very, very small roundabout. You have a larger concrete apron around it, but not anywhere near as big as a full-size roundabout. You don't have reverse curves. Now, some jurisdictions don't use reverse curves, so some people are like, well, it doesn't make sense anyway. Reverse curves are basically chicanes on the approach to a roundabout to try to start that slowing down of vehicles. And instead of that, again, some raised platforms and raising the area. Now, this is, it is a 100-kilometer road environment. It did get reduced to 80 around the intersection, but still very high speed. And then again, vertical deflection, and people just are wowed off them. But anyway, this one got built as well. So here's a bit of drone footage of it. And you can see this is a shallow raised platform, shallow raised intersection there. Let's move that forward a bit. So, slow down on the approach there. Slow down. And you can see there, a little hard to see, but you can see the small island there, the area where larger vehicles can track. And again, this one's performing extremely well. Didn't have to move that, didn't have to take that house. A bit of land acquisition, bit of moving of a road, but well under half, or a bit under half the cost of the full-size roundabout to get this in, which is giving those same speed reductions, improving angles, increasing alertness, lots of huge benefits. So again, I'm not particularly going to get into the details of the design of this. There's lots around that, but the principle of saying we're not going to accept leaving this high speed, high energy conflict area. We're going to push to get something in there that reduces those speeds, improves the angles, and gets us, really significant alignment with safe system principles. Okay, I've got a little quiz. Kathy's computer's just carked it, I think, so she'll be back shortly. But I'm going to pop up this poll, and then I'll check what we've got in terms of questions that might have come in. Okay, so poll's about to pop up on your screen. Remember, you're not being marked on this, but true or false? Traffic signals are not safe system. True, false, or unintelligible questions, which means That question doesn't really make sense to me. I don't like your question or the like. So as you're doing that, this question's coming in. What is the minimum and maximum speed to have a raised safety platform on a road? So if you look at the Department of Transport Victorian road design note, 80 kilometres an hour is your maximum speed limit. Have a look at the Austroads guide. It's got some information in there, and it depends sort of what you're trying to reduce speeds down to. So there's sort of an interesting interplay between the ramp grades you would use and speed environment you're in and what you're trying to get to. So I'd suggest you grab that Austroads document, of course, free of charge. Austroads documents these days, guides and research reports. So you can just type Austroads raised safety platform. You get that report. Of course, just email me if you're having any trouble with that, and I can send that to you. And same with the Department of Transport. If you put in road design note, raised safety platform, you'll find that as well. Okay, getting some good answers coming in here. Almost everybody's in. Let's end that, and I'm going to share the results. And most of you have gone with the unintelligible question, and I like that because certainly you don't have enough information really to answer that, and there's two things wrong with it, really. I mean, you don't know any of the context because it's not about the end product, is it? Like traffic signals in their own right are not a safe system or not safe system thing. It's where they're put, the speeds of vehicles and the like. Also, that's using safe system in a binary terminology, not safe system. It should be, do not align well with safe system principles or something like that. So unintelligible questions is a good one. So I put in a little bit of a trick, but I can say that people who said true, maybe you had a vision in your mind of high-speed signalized intersections, and people who said false, maybe you were saying, well, it's not about the signals themselves, it's about the context of that. So I can, everybody can have a, say that they're right for that. But what I do want to stress that occasionally people have come out of this course and said, traffic signals are not safe system. I'm like, whoa, okay, they can be very well aligned with safe system principles in the right environment, in the right context, doing the right thing. So don't fixate it on the treatment itself. Bring it back to, are we aligning well with those principles that people are going to make mistakes, and what's the injuries that are going to happen, the forces? How do we minimize the mistakes but manage the energy from those mistakes? Well done. Welcome back, Kathy. Okay. So I've got some key dot points out of that there in your notes if you just needed a summary. Let me briefly talk about lane departure crashes, and then I'm going to introduce you to your exercise. So here we go. We've got a big long road, stretches on basically one lane in each direction for about 300 kilometers. It's fairly straight throughout, occasional little kinks and turns, but very much a sort of straight road. You can see it's got a bit of sealed shoulder. It's the occasional overtaking lane and occasional minor intersection, driveways. It's got, the roadside with some cleared areas, some trees and the like. You don't know too much about this length of road. This road, it's 100 kilometre per hour speed limit, like most of these types of roads. Just pop into the chat what you think the crash types might be occurring there. All right. Well, so we know, wow. Okay, it's all coming in very well and very consistently. Run off road and head-on crashes. That's right. And we know that there's a huge amount of this. People leaving the road, they fall asleep, they're distracted by one thing or another. They leave their lane, they leave the road, or they crash into a vehicle coming the other direction. The bulk of the time, so well done to everybody on knowing the source of death and serious injury on these types of roads. The bulk of the time we see people on these types of roads drifting off to the left. It's usually the crossfall of the road pushes them slowly off to the left. These are on the straight sections. And then they wake up in the shoulder, or having left the road, come back to reality and overcorrect the wheel, and all sorts of chaos happens from there. And they may yaw once, which is to sort of slide out and then shoot across the other side of the road. They may sort of double yaw it, try to recorrect, or they may sort of continue out onto the left-hand side of the road. So we know that we have just got this, on this one, 300 kilometers of road where risk presents itself throughout. Okay? The idea that you would be able to find the specific black spots on these types of roads does not exist. I mean, there used to be some, you have a little bit of an increase in risk at, this little bit, but, that little increase in risk there, you still got high risk along here. So what we talk about is not trying to chase that lightning strike of crash, all right? Treat this as a corridor, understand that there is significant risk throughout this corridor, and we're trying to create road cross sections and road stereotypes that account for human failure. And the human failure is falling asleep, being distracted, and the like. Right, we're going to do what we can to try to keep them awake, to give them opportunity to rest, to do everything we can to minimize the amount of people falling asleep at the wheel, to encourage them to only drive when they're alert and the like, and not be distracted and keep. But let me tell you now, there's going to be this continual rollout of people in our community that will fall asleep at the wheel or be distracted. And it's our job just to start to create a road environment where that doesn't result in death or serious injury. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be expensive. There are great examples out there on the Australian Road Network and New Zealand Road Network where we're now seeing roads that align highly with those principles. And the first thing we've got to remember there is that amazingly low speeds that vehicles are designed to withstand in terms of the side impact point source hazards. And this is the old 29 kilometre per hour side impact test. It's now 32 kilometre per hour, but that's amazing. When we see what would be like a predicted 60 kilometre per hour, and this is pretty graphic. But this is the kind of energy we're talking in, and it's around 60 kilometers per hour, predicted based off the footage. The amount of energy and violence in that incident it's unsurvivable at 60 kilometers per hour. Okay? We're driving these roads at 100 kilometers an hour. Yes, when a vehicle yaws, leaves the road, it washes off a little bit of speed. But the yawing, and that's the sort of sliding side that happens, presents the side of the vehicle to point source hazards. And so we are so far from operating within a safe system envelope when we consider roadsides, trees, power poles, and the speeds that we operate over the vehicles. We're a bit closer for head-on, but we're still very far away on that one. And I'll talk to you a little bit about clearing out all those point source hazards. Now that certainly gets us better alignment with safe system principles. But we can do even better alignment with safe system principles. And you can see here an amazing little bit of research. So this one is about 3 organizations were doing research on this same topic at the same time. That was Newark, ARB, and CASA, all coming out with pretty much the same answers, which was if you create a clear zone, and a lot of you are just like, you grew up with clear zones like I did, which is where you calculate how far off the edge line should you clear all hazards, and you calculate that using a little chart, and you go, well, yeah, that's that much, and there was this sort of perception that, okay, if I've calculated a 9-meter clear zone, anything within that 9 meters is a hazard, and anything at 9.1 meters is not a hazard. Right? That's just how we thought about it. But when you step back from that and logically look at it, you go, well, of course that thing at 9.1 is a hazard. It's just less of a hazard than when it was at 8.9. Okay, but we did operate like there was some magical thing about this clear zone, and we saw things, crazy things like brand new roads with all of these trees planted at 9 meters. Or power poles all dotted down there at 9 meters. And while that was less risky than if they'd been at 5 meters or at 2 meters, it wasn't void of risk. Now, we didn't really have anything better. And then, this analysis looked at runoff rate casualty crashes per 100 million VKT. Prize for the person who tells me what VKT stands for first. And down here, we've got clear zone. So this is from edge line out, so area cleared. Benjamin, vehicle kilometers traveled. You are the prize winner. Hopefully Kathy's there and noting that. I better take a note of it.
I'm back. All good.
Oh, you got it. Good. So runoff road casualty crashes per 100 million VKT. So the reason you do it by 100 million vehicle kilometers traveled is to bring it back to a like-for-like comparison by different roads with different amount of vehicles and travel. So you're trying to, be able to compare a road with 10,000 vehicles and a road with 100,000 vehicles and get a like-for-like comparison based on your thing. So anyway, what you see there is sort of, the first 4-5 meters basically is where you get your big gain from clearing out all the hazards. And then it just starts to asymptote out after that. And you never get to that elimination of casualty crash risk by creating clear zone. So we know that a wide clear zone is not necessarily a safe place to be. So I talked about going beyond that, beyond whatever the clear zone is and hitting the hazards. But the other one I haven't really talked about here is that you create these large areas for rollover potential. As a vehicle leaves the road, it will start to yaw and, all sorts of stuff happens. And there's quite a high rollover potential in these cleared areas. Now, admittedly, rollover crashes in terms of energy transfer to the humans is less. We do see a lot of spinal injuries and other injuries like that in rollover crashes. In terms of it, high severity death and acquired brain injury, less certainly than point source hazards, but it's still a risk that we're sort of, it's a residual risk we're dealt with. Now, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there was nothing better than a clear zone, than a cleared area. But barrier technology has gone off the charts, like so good now, a flexible road safety barrier for passenger vehicles, that it is actually safer for a vehicle to leave the road, hit a barrier system around 4 meters from the edge line, than it is for them to take their chances in a cleared area where they're likely to roll over or go beyond it. Now that's quite an interesting little statement, isn't it? I mean, you're better to be involved in a crash than take your chances trying to not be involved in that crash in a cleared area. Anyway, so I'll leave you with that thought. The other interesting point is wide clear zones are virtually impossible to achieve due to native vegetation removal or the cost of like moving power poles or undergrounding power poles and the like. So to a degree, we're not going to be able to achieve them anyway, and they're not our safest thing to do. You do get your big benefit in the first 4 to 5 minutes. So there used to be a time, and in fact, even 2 years ago, if you were doing a major duplication of a road, you'd kind of build it like this. You'd have a couple of lanes, you'd have a big median, you probably wouldn't have that and that there. You'd have a calculated clear zone, you have all your trees running along there. Maybe have some audio tactile edge line and the like. You'd have a whole lot of things in there to reduce the likelihood of crashes, but nothing on the severity of the crashes. And we know that vehicles will, make their way to the other carriageway. They'll get out there and they'll hit the trees. And this is the Hume Freeway. And, we know there's a lot of death and serious injury on there. Now it's sort of continuous barrier systems, which is great. And this photo is an interesting one. It's got some truck shoulder rumble strips or rumble bars trying to alert truck drivers to leaving their lane because the audio tactile edge line isn't as effective for heavy vehicles. But that's just a little aside. But the new Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 6 sort of starts the process of challenging that usual, well, let's just create cleared areas. And it's really tragic to see when a multi-billion-dollar road upgrade is done and it's finished, and within months of cutting the ribbon, a vehicle runs across a median, collides with a vehicle with a family in it and kills everybody. You're just like, how can we possibly be building billion-dollar infrastructure where we just go, of course there'll be death and serious injury over the next 10 years on it, but if people drive properly, it won't happen. I mean, it's absurd. They're like, if that was rail, for example, and they built a billion-dollar rail line, and they go, oh there'll definitely be death and serious injury over the next 5 years on this new rail line. They would go, well, okay, change the design. That's not going to happen. But we sort of, in the road space, just go, oh yeah, well, it's road users. And so we're challenging that. We're pushing back on it. Part 6 helps. It's doing some interesting stuff. I won't go into detail, but I'll give you this sort of general high-level idea that we're really going to try and create full containment with barrier systems. The bumper bowling of roads, as some people like to term it. But you fall asleep, leave the lane, hit the barrier rather than cleared area, tree, and the like. Ideally, we stop them falling asleep in the first place, but the reality is it'll continue to happen, and we try and minimize the severity. And it sort of goes down from there in terms of effectiveness and alignment with safe system principles. And becomes an interesting point where you get more head-on crashes to run-off-road crashes, but I'm not going to get into that detail. And I've got lots of cross sections here. I mean, interestingly, for anybody who knows about star rating roads, that's a bit hard to see. This big clear zone in the median, big clear zones on the outside, that's a 4-star road. But if you've put a barrier system here and a barrier system here and a barrier system here, that's a 5-star road. And that, just look at the land area and the cross section you've had to get. So it could be cheaper to build this cross section anyway, and safer. I got a few other cross sections in there, but there are lots of detailed design challenges with implementation of continuous barrier systems and how you do it, and providing areas for vehicles to pull over and all that sort of implementation stuff. It does need to be worked through, but I won't go into detail on that. I'll finish with a couple of things, and then we'll do a good bit of explanation and answer any questions, a bit of explanation about the assignment you've got to do, which I think you'll enjoy. The concept of energy management. So yes, we want to stop vehicles crashing, but we need to manage that energy. I think this highlighted quite nicely with this crash, which is an old Ford carrying 4 male passengers at about 2 in the morning in Mildura. So unfortunately, the scenario is very common around Australia. And, we're trying to, with other elements of the system, trying to address that. But the vehicle came in and it was a roundabout. And so they came through and lost control, left the road, hit the power pole. The power pole had a thing called a Raptor on it. Now that's a Raptor cushion. And a Raptor is a device that sort of, it's a bit squishy, so it'll absorb some of the energy. But the real sort of brilliance of it is the fact that it rotates when struck. So, the angle of it here means that when a vehicle hits it, it sort of rotates and it pushes the energy along. Or, it doesn't mean that the vehicle immediately hard stops on the power pole. So it's about thinking about how do we manage the energy there. Now, why not a barrier system? Well, usually in a lot of these spaces, you don't have the room to put a barrier system for one reason or another. And so it's really interesting. And again, I'm not saying that product specifically is wonderful. I mean, it in different circumstances, it does a wonderful thing. But the concept, again, of energy management, how do we take that energy and dissipate it over time rather than that instantaneous stop, is just wonderful. And so again, another one that's hitting up that severity of outcome. I'm not sure we have another quiz for today. I'll just have a quick look there. We do. I'm going to just launch another quiz here, just a little one before I hand over to Kathy to show you. What do we got here? True or false? Sealed shoulders improve road safety. Okay, that's an interesting one. True, false, or unintelligible question. Interesting one. Okay. I might end that. And let's have a look at what people are saying. People are generally saying true, and in almost all scenarios, it is true. They reduce the likelihood of crashes, give areas people to cover. There's probably some scenarios where it might be false, and maybe the people, few scenarios where adding a shoulder could be an issue, but generally it is overwhelmingly true. Unintelligible question, potentially, because again, no context or anything like that. But the reason I put that question in is because, again, like a sealed shoulder is what we would term a likelihood reducing factor. It does nothing for the severity of crashes. Okay. So when you're analyzing it from a alignment with safe system principles, it brings us a bit more aligned with safe system principles. But it does not address that severity, and it doesn't get us all that way, but it does, improve things a bit. So again, just trying to dispel a few sort of things that may come out of the course as sort of misinterpretations. Again, there's a few key points in there that you can have a look at in your own time. Okay, Kathy, what do you reckon? Should we get people to have a look at an assignment?
Yes, Ken, we should. Hopefully you can see my screen now momentarily.
Yes.
So we're in module 2 and just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's jumped in and done the quiz in module 1. There's another quiz in module 2, just again a short multiple choice style questionnaire. So if you haven't done those yet, do jump in and do those. You do need to complete those before the end of the program. But I've also popped a couple of things in there. That Austroads document on the raised platforms, and there was also a webinar last year sometime, I think,
Good.
on that as well. But here's your assignment. So you just jump into there and there's a Word document. And we are here.
Beautiful. Okay, so there's nice instructions in there, step-by-step instructions, and they say that you are to select an intersection. It could be any intersection, the one out the front of your house, it could be the one near your office, it could be one that you remember from a holiday you went on. It doesn't need to be one that you think is particularly dangerous, or it could be just pick an intersection. You're not going to need to go to it, but if it happens to be out the front of your house or something, you can certainly use that. And then you're going to fill out all the information we have below that is highlighted. Now, this is a theme that goes throughout this course. Anything highlighted in yellow requires you to do something, okay? And so you'll see there, you're going to fill out your name. Then you're going to give us a link to that intersection on Street View or Google, or the coordinates of it or something like that. The reason for that is when we get in there to mark it, we just want to jump in there and have a quick look ourselves, okay? So then you go to the next page, which is going to have all the meat of what you're going to be doing, okay? And what we want you to do is identify things that influence the exposure to crashes. Okay, we want between 1 and 3. Okay, now remember, exposure is about the number of people exposed to the crashes. So this could be the number of legs to the intersection, the number of pedestrians crossing because it's on the pedestrian desire line, the number. You see, I'm saying number. Think always about the number of road users, okay? What factors are influencing the number of road users is the way that could be rephrased, but we call it exposure. So you do that. Then you go, okay, what are factors at this intersection that influence the likelihood of crashes? Okay, these are all those things that we know just attribute to likelihood. Could be the control at the intersection, could be the signalization, the signs, the lighting, the sight distance, whatever you've sort of looked at. And it could be, skid resistance, line marking, visual deceit, confusing intersection, whatever it is, the likelihood. Then we want between 1 and 3 things that influence the severity. Okay, so we're into severity. So now you're going to have to think about angles of crashes, the weight of vehicles, the speeds, angles, could be the vulnerability of the lots of old people, so they're more likely to be severely injured. Exposure, likelihood, and severity. So you've analysed the existing site. Okay, then we want only one thing that you could change that would influence that particular category. So one thing you could do to alter the number of people exposed to a crash. Okay, one thing then that will influence the likelihood of the crash that you could change. You could add something or fix something or do something else. One thing, and one thing on the severity. One change you can make. This one, we have not limited you on budget, on achievability, or anything like that. This is literally a test to see that you understand how to categorize exposure and likelihood and severity, and you generally are able to do that at, able to look at an intersection and understand it. Okay, this is a very short task. You don't need to overcook this. If you're spending, even like an hour on this, that's too much. You're really just needing to look at it. You can jump in on Street View. You can put that link in. and then go, yep, exposures, this, likelihood, this, severity, this, and then change this, change this, change this. Done. Then you save it, and then you upload it. And there's an upload button in your version. Kathy, I think it's in the teacher version. Oh no, in student version. It's just not there yet.
Yes.
And then you upload it, and that's it. When's it due?
It's due next Tuesday afternoon.
Okay.
For some reason, it's not coming up in this version, but here we go. So yes, Tuesday before the next session, which is on Wednesday morning. So that way you have a chance to have a look at those, Ken, and we can talk about that in the next session.
Yeah. And so next session, we will be asking for volunteers to talk us through their intersection analysis. Certainly a chance to win a prize for the people who volunteer. That will jump into their thing on Street View. So get those in. As I say, shouldn't take long. If you are confused, if you're going, I don't understand what I have to do, I don't understand what is exposure, what is likelihood, what is severity, you can get in contact with Kathy or myself, and we can help you through that, give you a bit of coaching, give you a bit of guidance. But you've done the little exercise in today's session where you've got a bit of that thinking. We've done some more discussion about it, and hopefully you'll do all right. Kathy, anything else?
Thank you, Ken. No, just it is a really good exercise to do before we actually send you out to the site that we've assigned you, where you do the more full-blown safe system assessment. So the idea with this one is that you get practice, you get some feedback, and you're well set up to go for when you've got to do your safe system assessment.
There is a quiz as well.
There is a quiz as well, yes. Very short quiz. So look, we're finishing 5 minutes early, which is excellent time to get on and do the quiz. And if you're having any issues with Moodle, there's a couple of people that I notice haven't quite jumped in there yet. Just get in touch with me and we'll help you out there. Any last questions or comments from anyone?
Yep. Get into it, and you're definitely going to need to access Moodle. You will not successfully complete this course if you can't get into Moodle. So make sure that happens. Knock off that quiz now, jump into the assignment, you'll be done before lunch.
Ken, I'm not sure, this might have been when I dropped out there momentarily. There was a question about what is the minimum and maximum speed to have a raised platform. Did you get that one? Yep.
Yeah, we did. And you've done a wonderful job there in putting the Ostrodes document in there, which I referred to in Moodle, so people can have a look at that and find the section on ramp grades and speeds, and there's some good information in there.
Maybe a quiz question next time. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye.